Thank you, Mr. Chair. I confirm that I represent the three applicants, together with my learned friend, Ms. Claire Everdon, seated to my right, by the instruction...
Can you just do me a favor and spell your surname for me? Is it an O or A?
It is spelled O-L-D.
Yeah.
W-A.
W-A.
W-A-D-G-E.
D-G-E.
K-C.
K-C.
And Miss Everdon, A-V-I-D-O-N, appears with me.
Mr. Sorry?
Miss Everdon.
Everdon.
A-V-I-D-O-N, Chair. And we're instructing by the law firm Padiachi Attorneys. Mr. Padiachi is in attendance with us, seated to my left. Mr. Chair, we represent the three applicants, Akafrau, Watkins and African Mobility Solutions, and I will deal with the aspect that it has undergone a name change from MST.
Yes, can I just place on record that an application was lodged to cross-examine two of the PIC witnesses who have already given evidence, Mr. Roy Raja and Ms. Matsikanda, Constance Matsikanda. An order has been granted for such cross-examination. That's just for the record.
As you please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Might I then proceed?
Can I just get Mr. Raja to take the oath? Mr. Raja, you're very familiar with taking the oath. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Raise your right hand, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you very much. Yes. Will you switch on the mic?
Get closer to the mic here, please. Thank you.
Might we establish from you, sir, what was your position or your official designation with the PIC in June of 2015?
Through you, Commissioner, I think I could have been the senior fund principal or the executive head of developmental investments. I'm not quite sure. But the role was substantially the same.
If the role was substantially the same, can you tell us what were your duties and functions at that point in time? Bearing in mind, of course, that this was when the loan application had been received from MST. And for your benefit, I'm going to continuously refer to MST, the third applicant, albeit that we know that it's undergone a name change.
Through you, Commissioner, my role at the time was the overseeing of the developmental investments unit, which is now called Impact Investing. So my role is as a manager of the division. So that would be my role. In terms of transactions, that would be oversight and guidance to the investment team.
Mr. Aldrich, are you able to, for our benefit, just indicate what areas of his evidence, or is it just general cross-examination, or are there certain areas that you're going to concentrate on?
Mr. Chair, I will deal with, at the outset, with the statement by Mr. Rajda, dated the 18th of March 2019. It's MST 7, Annex MST 7 to the application, whereafter I will deal with various aspects of his previous evidence before the Commission as it relates, in particular, to the loan application.
Mr. Commissioner, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a need to rearrange the deck chairs because my learned friend is not on TV. The TV wants him in my chair. I'll move up. Can we just have a 1-minute rearrangement of the seating. I
Yeah, can that
apologize.
happen while we're sitting here?
Yes,
Yes. All right, you can go ahead.
I should raise an objection because I don't want to be on TV, Mr. Chair.
Ordinary, I would say objection overruled.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
When you're ready, Mr. Ulrich.
Mr. Commissioner, I'm ready to proceed. Mr. Rajda, I understand that we have limited time, so I'm going to try and move on as fast as possible. If there is something that you're not clear on, which flows from the question that I posed, I invite you to raise that with me if you would. Thank you. I'm going to refer you to what is MST 7. Mr. Commissioner, it's to be found at page 116 of the applicant's bundle, paginated page 116. And I'm going to refer, Mr. Rajda, to that statement, which I understand was signed by you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In relation to your knowledge of the facts and circumstances as they pertained to what I will refer to as the MST transaction. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In particular, sir, I'm going to invite your response, if you have any, to what is contained in the statement at paragraph 10. And at paragraph
Sorry,
10...
Mr. Ulrich, our papers have the, excuse me, the record, which is not the statement itself. So are you able to refer, for instance, to page 116, possibly line so-and-so? Have you got the record, or do you have the actual statement?
I have the actual statement, Mr. Commissioner. I think the reason for this difficulty is that there are two bundles. So there is the applicant's bundle, properly paginated and indexed, and then there is a supplementary bundle, which is comprised of the transcript of the proceedings, commencing at page 1 through to page 130. And Mr. Commissioner, I'm making reference to a document contained at page 118 of the applicant's bundle. It's in fact MST 7, Annexure MST 7 to the application, if that assists.
We don't have annexures to the bundle. We've got the bundle that contain papers in the application for leave to cross-examine, and then pages of the record that is on the website. But I don't think it should really be a problem. You aren't able to refer rather to the supplementary bundle that you have, because it's probably the same as the papers that we have.
Regrettably, Mr. Commissioner, I'm not able to do so because that supplementary bundle of mine only contains the transcript. But we will make, if it meets with your approval, we will make another copy of my attorney's bundle available to you. Regrettably,
which
we only
has the
have one
statements.
copy. That, Mr. Commissioner, that is the actual application for leave to cross-examine. Mr. Commissioner would have noted with respect that we compiled a voluminous bundle of the actual papers as well as supporting documentation in the form of annexes to the application. And that is the bundle that I'm actually referring to at present.
Well, the annexures we don't have.
I apologize. I was instructed that all of that was made available to Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, I will immediately find out. It was made available. It's 2 bundles, and it should be before the Commission, but I will immediately find out where it is.
Mr. Commissioner, I wish you to, with respect, follow, obviously, the cross-examination. Is it then appropriate for us to stand down for that purpose? Because I'm going to be referring to this document at length.
Mr. Libber, do you think it will take, what, 5-10 minutes?
A maximum 5 minutes, Mr.
5
Commissioner.
minutes. Right, we'll adjourn for 5 minutes and come back.
As you please.
Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, my apology for the administrative oversight. The statement is now available.
So you're referring to the 6-page statement?
Indeed, Mr. Commissioner, and in particular page 118 of the applicant's bundle. With your leave, might I then proceed?
Please do.
Thank you. Mr. Rajda, we note at paragraph 12 of that statement, and can we accept that the statement was prepared for purposes of really providing your version in relation to MST's transaction with the PIC, insofar as you had knowledge of the intricacies of the transaction? Can we accept that to be correct?
Yes.
I note at paragraph 12, page 118, you made reference to a due diligence process that had been completed. Might I then just establish from you that at the time when you made this statement, and in particular at a time when the proceeds of the loan facility were paid out to MST, you together with your colleagues at the PIC responsible for a consideration of this application would have established the nature of MST's operations, what it was doing insofar as business affairs were concerned, and that it was a viable company for purposes of the loan facility. Would you agree that that's an accurate statement?
Yes, it is.
And if I was to put it to you that MST is in fact the only corporate entity in South Africa specializing in the provision of various essential services, for instance, healthcare, education, processing solutions by way of mobile units equipped with up-to-date technology since its formation in 2010, would you agree with that statement?
Through you, Commissioner, I cannot confirm that. I'm not aware that it's the only one.
You're not in a position to dispute that either, am I correct?
Yes, I'm not in a position to dispute that.
And in fact, if I was to put it to you that by virtue of what it does in providing these, what I term to be social services, it provides a very welcome and needed solution for many of the social ills that we are faced with in this country. Would you agree with that?
I agree, and that was included in my testimony when I presented to this commission.
In fact, you went as far as to testify, Mr. Rajda. You said, Mr. Commissioner, it's to be found in the transcript at page 17, against lines 11 to 13, and I quote, "It's a very good project that can improve and touch the lives of many South Africans, particularly youth, and that's the sad thing about where we are today," unquote. You recall that testimony of yours?
Yes, I do.
Now, I'm here to address on behalf of my clients, Mr. Rajda, that caption which reads, "Sad thing about where we are today." Please enlighten us as to what you meant with that caption.
Through you, Commissioner, what I meant was that we are in a stage of litigation to call out for PIC to exercise its rights. That is what I meant. If I can amplify on that, was to mean that that this could cause a situation where this company could no longer be in existence, and consequently it impacts in terms of delivery to those cohorts that I had mentioned during my testimony.
Now, I can safely put it to you that there have been more recent developments that I'm going to invite you to consider, because that may change your situation as to how you view the present state of affairs vis-à-vis MST. In particular, it has made a recent payment of approximately 3.1 million rand to the PIC in repayment of its loan facility as recent as 1 July of this year. Are you aware of that?
I became aware of it whilst we were sitting outside this room, Commissioner.
Very well. And so when you refer to there being litigation, I'm also going to put it to you that no litigation has commenced against MST, but for correspondence that you refer to as default letters having been sent to MST, but no formal steps, i.e. the issue of summons against MST, for instance, have been taken. Do you agree with me?
Through Commissioner, to explain, in the PIC, the matter has been transferred to the legal division, so I only get to get information intermittently. So as far as I am aware, lawyers have been appointed to act on behalf of the PIC to exercise its rights in terms of the agreements. That's my understanding.
So insofar as my question is concerned, you're not in a position to dispute that what I've put to you. In fact, what I've put to you is correct because you wouldn't have knowledge. You're not intricately involved with whatever it is that your legal team, whether internal or external, may be doing vis-a-vis MST. Do you agree with me?
Through you, Commissioner, yes, I can't confirm nor can I dispute.
And I can also put it to you, sir, that, and we'll deal with that in much more detail in due course, that the payment that I've referred to in the amount of approximately 3.1 million rand is a payment called for by the PIC in terms of a restructure of this loan facility and a schedule that was sent to the third applicant, MST, by the PIC. Are you able to dispute that?
Through you, Commissioner, I'm a member of the Portfolio Management Committee at PIC. No restructure can happen without the approval of the Portfolio Management Committee. And I am not aware of the Portfolio Management Committee having approved any such restructure.
But are you aware of the payment that was made in, is it July, you said?
Mr. Commissioner, the 1st of July this year, indeed.
Are you aware of that payment?
Commissioner, I became aware of it when we were sitting outside earlier this morning.
That means only this morning. Yeah.
Just a question, when you say payment, is that paid on Monday to reflect on Tuesday or same day or Wednesday?
Mr. Commissioner, I'd be misleading if I was to answer that question. My understanding is that the payment was effected by means of an electronic funds transfer, and with respect, I understand the import of your question being from a different bank. It may take 2 or 3 days. I understand that to be the position, and that is a possibility, but I'm told that the payment was in fact made on Monday.
That's in accordance with your instructions.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Sorry, can I have a follow-up question? If there has been a payment made, and I'm assuming that is in relation to the outstanding amounts and the disputes, is this an agreement of a series of payments that MST is now agreeing to make, and what is that schedule so that we know that the agreement is about future payments? Because obviously this testimony was in March, when the issues were very different from some kind of agreement between the legal team, and as Mr. Rogers says, restructuring would require approval that you're saying you are not aware of that approval, but that's a restructure of that debt. Is this part of a schedule of payments that there has been an agreement to by the PIC that MST is going to serve going forward?
Mr. Commissioner, that is indeed correct. It is the very first payment that would feature in a schedule, which I might add was sent to MST by the PIC. Mr. Commissioner, you'll find that schedule at Annexure MST 25. And then, if I might, with respect, invite your attention to Annexure MST 25, Commissioner, it's on page number 623. 623 of the applicant's bundle. And there is a cover mail that was sent to James Trotter, who happens to be the financial manager of MST, by Innocent Ndala. And I note from her email address that she is someone from the PIC, on the 11th of February 2019. The subject matter, of course, of that being MST balance as at 31 January 2019. The contents of the email...
Sorry, can you just say what the balance was?
I beg your pardon.
Can you also just give us what that balance was?
The balance. The balance at that point in time was 24,450,678 rand and 34 cents, Commissioner. But of particular significance, of course, is what is contained in the body of this mail, where it says, and I quote, "As agreed with Richard this morning, kindly find attached amortization schedule as at 31 January 2019. The outstanding balance as at that date is 24,450,678 rand and 34 cents. And Commissioner, it's in relation to that schedule attached to that cover mail, MST 25, that a payment was in fact made on the 1st of July this year.
Was that the scheduled date for that payment, given that this was in February?
My understanding, Commissioner, is that the scheduled date was the 6th of July. In other words, the payment therefore preceded the date on which the payment was required to have been made. And of further significance, Commissioners, of course, the fact that sometime prior to this payment having been made, it was communicated to the PIC that MST would be taking steps to address this difficulty that had been occasioned in its cash flow problems that it experienced at that time, and that this was the consequence of an accumulation of a number of months' payments, which had been the subject matter of an undertaking concerning a future payment. So in essence, this is MST then fulfilling on its undertaking in accordance with the schedule provided by the PIC.
Commissioner, if I may comment on that. Just to state that providing an amortization schedule does not constitute an addendum to the agreement. Nor when you are in default does it mean that payments may be suspended. The PIC can still request payments. So I think if we, assuming that this amortization schedule constitutes a restructuring of the loan, that is not the case.
But at the time of the payment, or rather at the time that you testified last time, these developments hadn't taken place.
No, they hadn't taken place, but even if we talk about the payment that is being made on 1 July, the fact that there is payment does not mean that now you are no longer in breach. That doesn't apply. The obligation is still there on the company to pay the installments due, and in fact, if not remedied, strictly speaking, the loan accelerates. That's mean it becomes payable in full. That's what the implication is.
Do you know anything about the schedule that the council is talking about? It came from the PIC?
Yeah, that's the schedule that has been referred to, the amortization schedule.
Do you know personally about it?
No.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Rajda, I'm somewhat astounded that you wouldn't know about this, because you were already favored with the applicant's bundle, of which MST 25 is an annexure. in May of this year, did you not consider the application?
Commissioner, if you can clarify what application is being referred to.
The application by the three applicants to cross-examine you and your colleague, Ms. Madzikanda.
Commissioner, if I may just state that in terms of the review of the documentation, it had been furnished. I had only looked at the documentation in the last week. So I just want to confirm that. Because we weren't sure whether we were going to be under cross-examination.
And can I then establish from you now that you have considered this documentation, it's not your evidence that you do not condone this course of action initiated by the PIC, is it?
Yeah. Through you, Commissioner, if you can please clarify what you mean.
In fact, you welcome the payment that has been made and future payments in terms of the schedule. Do you agree with me?
We welcome the payment, though at this point in time we will welcome the full settlement of the loan.
Well, it's not due yet, sir. So I'm not going to dwell on that aspect for the present moment. We'll move on to what is also in your statement.
Sorry, Commissioner, if I may just state, the amount is due because the company is in default and the breach has not been remedied. That's my understanding.
I could debate with you for the remainder of the day the issue concerning this schedule furnished by the PIC. I choose not to do so for reasons that we don't have time for that, Mr. Rajda. Rather, I'd invite your attention to paragraph 21 of your statement, Mr. Commissioner, at page 119 of the applicant's bundle, and in particular your reference to the caption satisfaction of conditions precedent. Do you see that, Mr. Rajda?
Yes, I do.
If you would kindly turn to page 120, the very next page, and in particular paragraph G. I read it to you. It references various documents evidencing pledge, cession, guarantees and subordination of debts in favor of PIC were to be duly executed and become unconditional and in full force and effect. You agree with me that's an accurate recordal of what is contained in paragraph G?
It is accurate.
Now, there is also a reference at paragraph N on the same page to providing tax clearance certificates. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And will you agree with me that all of these conditions precedent were in fact fulfilled?
Through you, Commissioner, what would happen is the legal firm that we appoint would issue a CP satisfaction letter when the conditions have been met, and I can confirm that that did happen.
So what that means, Mr. Rajda, is with particular reference to paragraph G, the security that is described in paragraph G was something that the PIC was in possession of prior to the loan facility being approved. Do you agree with me?
Through you, Commissioner, I don't logically and not understanding the PIC process, that wouldn't be the case. Because the process, the investment process in the PIC is, you don't start legal agreements before approval. Only once you have got an approval, then you do legal agreements. So I cannot say that it would have been in place when the approval was made. It wouldn't have been.
I can then put it to you that it is in fact in place as we speak today. If you're not prepared to commit to a time frame, I can put it to you that those securities were in place and are in place as we speak, and was in place when you first gave evidence in these proceedings.
Commissioner, I think you are not understanding me. In terms of the PIC process, when the transaction is, when the loan is brought to the committee for approval, I'm saying at that point in time, there cannot be legal agreements concluded. What I can say is that those legal agreements have been concluded, and thereafter disbursement has been made, and they are still there. That's what I'm stating. But what I'm saying is that it cannot be that the legal agreements would have been in place at the time of the approval of the loan. It would not have been.
I hear your version that they are in place. That's really the point that I seek to raise with you, following which I can put it to you that if your colleague was to have testified in these proceedings, your colleague being Ms. Madzikanda, that no security was in place whatsoever and that the PIC retained no security for its loan, that evidence would not have been true. Do you agree with me?
Commissioner, I cannot speak for Ms. Madzikanda. I can't even remember what her evidence was.
I'm going to invite your comment on a statement, which is a simple statement I'm putting to you, sir. Any evidence before this commission that there was no security in place whatsoever is false. I invite your comment to that.
There would have been some security in place. I think that perhaps, what I know in PIC, the main security they are referring to is the special notarial bond. Because a pledge of shares in a bankrupt company is worth zero. So I think that's what the effect. So let's look at the substance of it is the pledge of shares or cession of shareholder claims in a bankrupt company is worth zero. The emphasis here was on the registration of the special notarial bond.
No, that's not the question, sir. The question relates to security. And what was put to you was that the evidence was that there was no security in place whatsoever. That is a false statement. I'm not seeking your comment on whether what you referred to as the special notarial bonds were in place.
And when you say the evidence was, you mean the evidence of Ms. Madzikanda?
Indeed, Commissioner. So therefore you will concede, with reference to no security whatsoever, that evidence cannot be true and correct.
I agree that it is, technically it's not true.
I note your reference to technically. Thank you, Mr. Rajda. We then proceed to paragraph 22. And there we find a reference to the special notarial bond, which you say was incapable of being registered, and I'll deal with that in due course. And then there was a complaint with reference to the failure to have rendered audited annual financial statements for MST. If I was to put it to you today that this situation with reference to the audited annual financial statements of MST has, for the most part, been remedied, with the exception of the annual financial statements audited, that is, for 2016. But you've indeed received that, the audited annual financial statements for 2018. Do you agree with me?
Through you, Commissioner, we have received the audited financial statements for 30th of June 2018. I want to point out that those financial statements were delivered to us on the very day that I testified at the Commission. So I think what I testified at the Commission probably had an impact on that. But suffice to say, those financial statements, I think we are hurriedly prepared. And if we can go through them, I will show that, in my opinion, the auditors were reckless in issuing those financial statements. For example, it's in the PIC loan, it says it is unsecured. The loan is not unsecured. By your very earlier statement of referring me to paragraph G, 21G, you've conceded that there's security. That is not stated in that notes, that's the one. Number two, in the fixed asset note, it is not stated that those assets are encumbered in favor of PIC. The third thing is, the auditor's report does not state does not have an emphasis of matter, given this legal proceedings and the company being in breach. And the fact is, it would either have an emphasis of matter on going concern or an outright qualification on going concern. So those financial statements, in my opinion, was prepared in haste, and I think it has errors in it.
And has the PIC raised its concerns, as you've now mentioned them, with MST or with the auditors of MST to express your discontent, Mr. Rajda?
Through you, Commissioner, I have raised this concern with the post-investment team. I can't confirm whether they have raised it with MST. I think Ms. Madikanza and her evidence can give an update in terms of that.
Your reference at paragraph 25 of your statement, where you say MST has applied to PIC to restructure its facility. This proposal was tabled to PMC unlisted investments, but was rejected primarily because PIC has experienced great difficulty in obtaining audited financial statements for 30 June 2016 through to 2018. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall whether it was also your evidence? Because we've heard from you that at the time when this loan was applied for in June of 2015, you found it, pursuant to your investigations and your due diligence processes, a viable entity to grant a loan facility to. My question in that context is simply this. You have also testified previously...
Can I ask you, Mr. Aldridge, to speak a little closer to the mic?
As you please. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. You've testified previously that a number of these difficulties, or so you were told, were caused by bad publicity received by MST in the media. Do you recall that?
I recall stating to this commission that MST had indicated that the publicity, negative publicity, had been a cause of the financial position of the company.
In fact, I can put it to you that that adverse publicity has resulted in many communications to the management of MST, people being concerned about its position in the marketplace. And in fact, I can also put it to you that a contract worth a substantial amount of money was cancelled, all of which created difficulties in the cash flow of MST. You're not in a position to dispute that, and I'll invite you to consider the founding affidavit in this application, because reference is made to those aspects in the application. But you're not able to dispute what I've put to you.
I'm not able to dispute. Also, I have seen no evidence to suggest that the adverse media publicity resulted in the financial position of the company what it is. Also, the adverse media publicity would have not caused the non-issuance of financial statements which predated these, if I may refer to as the pretty low matter.
You see, Mr. Rajda, I must put it to you that if you had bothered to read the application, you would have noticed in this application that all of those reasons are being advanced and corroborated. So it assists us not that you're not in a position to comment, whilst you ought to have considered the papers in your possession. But let me be specific in that regard. There was a contract worth R1 million a month lost in August 2017. You cannot dispute that, can you?
I can't dispute that, nor can I nor can I confirm that it was as a result of the adverse media publicity. I cannot.
Thank you for that concession. I then want to showed to you what it is that I'm actually referring to. If you would turn to page 98, Mr. Commissioner, page 98, it's in fact Annexure MST3 of the applicant's bundle. Mr. Rajda, you will see that what we have here is a reference to what you in fact alleged. It's regrettably, the paragraphs are not numbered, but you'll find at unnumbered paragraph 3, and I will read it to you. It says, Head of Impact Investment Roy Rajda has told the PIC inquiry that 21 million rand invested in MST was to be used to manufacture buses. However, only one bus was produced. Do you see that?
I see that.
And it then goes further to say, Rajda and fellow witness Constance Majikanda have also told the Commission that the loan hasn't been serviced and it's been difficult to get any information from the company. You see that?
I see that.
Now that invites a negative perception from somebody who would read this publication. It's in fact a printout of what are featured on the Eyewitness News program. You see that?
Yes, I see that. I don't necessarily agree that what's contained in there is true, but I see.
Well, that's the difficulty with media reports. We don't know whether it's true or not. But the reader must assume that the reporter did so and reported accurately and correctly. Do you accept that?
Accept that.
I don't know whether you're conversant in Afrikaans, but on the very next page, Commissioner, page 99, still part of Annexure MST 3B, it says the following, with reference in particular to MST. It says, against the 7th line, MST bied mobiele gezondheids- en onderrigdienste aan minderbevoorregtes. Hy gebruik busse wat spesiaal vir die doel ontwerp is en het die OBK om 'n lening gevra om 7 nuwe busse te bou. And it goes further to say, Rajda het getuig al die korrekte prosesse is gevolg om die lening goed te keer. Maar benewens die 21 miljoen rand lening het die OBK ook 5 miljoen rand as korporatiewe maatskaplike belegging aan MST toegestaan. MST wou glo die geld aanwend om sy profiel vir swart ekonomiese bemagtiging te verbeter. And then of course my emphasis is the following. You will find it 9 lines from the bottom of this article, Mr. Rajda. It says, die 21 miljoen rand lening lyk nie na 'n goeie transaksie nie. MST het die afgelope 2 jaar nie die vereiste finansiële staat aan die OBK verskaf nie. Kon nie bewys dat die lening uitsluitlik vir die bou van busse gebruik is soos dit ingekom is nie en het ook nie die lening gedelg nie. Unquote. You see all of that. Now, you would agree with me, with respect, that what we read here seems to suggest that MST is in dire straits. And it must raise certain questions concerning its application and subsequent utilization of the loan facility proceeds. Do you agree?
Of course,
Yes,
what you,
Afrikaans was a
sorry,
bit
sorry,
complex.
Mr. Raja, sorry. Of course, what you have just read, one can't make out whether it was a statement made by him or a comment by the journalist who wrote the article. It seems to me that that's a comment, isn't it?
It is indeed so, Mr. Commissioner, but the emphasis of the cross-examination, and obviously the question that I'm putting, is that one can reasonably infer from these press reports that MST found itself in financial difficulties, and of course questions must be raised concerning the manner in which it acquired the loan proceeds and its subsequent utilization of it.
No, I didn't suggest that the question was wrong or unfair, but I was just saying this appears to me to be a comment from the writer of the article. But if Mr. Raja, if you are able to respond to the question, please do.
Commissioner, I think the Afrikaans is a bit high for me. I didn't understand much of it, but I can get from the from the words, they are negatively worded.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you for that concession, Mr. Rajdar. So what we have now established is that there was this adverse publicity, and when we say to you, at least my instructions are to put it to you, that negatively impacted on MST's business affairs, that is support for the statement that I put to you. You understand that?
Commissioner, I can't confirm that as a fact. I don't know whether the negative publicity had an impact on the financial position of the company. It could, maybe not, or maybe partially, I don't know.
As long as I understand that to be an answer that you're not in a position to dispute it. The next theme of my cross-examination, Mr. Rajdar, is the testimony before the Commission concerning, or the allegation that the proceeds of the loan facility were not utilized for the manufacture of new buses. My emphasis being on the word new. Do you understand that?
I understand that.
At the outset, I wish to establish from you that we interpret the evidence that you and Ms. Madzikanda have delivered to this Commission correctly when we say your allegation is that the loan proceeds were not utilized for purposes of manufacturing new buses. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Are you then saying that the loan proceeds may not have been utilized for other business activities associated with the provision of buses, particularly in relation to such buses being the subject matter of lease transactions?
The proceeds were to be used exclusively for the manufacture of buses.
Mr. Rajdar, you will note, and I refer you to page 393 of the applicant's bundle, which is in fact the agreement, the term loan facility agreement concluded between the Unemployment Insurance Fund and MST. And in particular, I invite your attention to clause 4, to be found on page 393. Clause 4.1. What clause 4 does is it records the purpose with which the proceeds of the facility are made available and to be utilized. Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Good. This is what clause 4.1 in fact says. The borrower shall apply all amounts borrowed by it under the facility for purposes of designing, constructing, assembling, operating, and leasing of bus units. Do you see that?
I do.
You,
Regrettably, we don't have a copy of that contract, but you may proceed.
Commissioner, I sincerely apologize. It is an annexure to the papers. It's in fact annexure MST 16. And I sincerely apologize. My attorney says he has made it available. Perhaps Mr. Libber can assist us.
Mr. Commissioner, it is in that bundle of annexures. I will quickly arrange with the Secretariat to make copies available.
Yes, please, because at this stage you are disadvantaged because we don't have the document.
The bundle we've got goes up to page 362. Yeah.
There are two files.
What I'm saying is that the file that we have goes up to page 362.
Yes.
So you're beyond that, which means it's probably in another file, so that's the file that we need to get.
Commissioner, that is indeed correct. It's
Yeah.
the second file.
Yeah, so that's what I was just advising, that this file only goes up to page 362.
Thank you, Commissioner.
But you're referring to page 393 and clause 4.1 on that.
Indeed, Mr. Commissioner.
You may proceed.
Thank you.
We'll get the file.
Mr. Rajda, I've now read that to you. So what we have here is a description. I can also say to you that this is the document that governs the conduct of the transacting parties, and in particular, it records the purpose with which the loan proceeds, or the purpose of the loan proceeds, is to facilitate those aspects listed in clause 4.1. You agree with me?
I agree.
Now, sir, where in this clause do you see a reference to only the manufacture of new buses? Please tell us.
Through you, Commissioner. When you have designing, constructing, assembling, those are references to new. If it was old, you would use words such as deconstruction, refurbishment, I don't know what's the reverse of assembling, maybe de-assembling. That's what you would have if you are talking about used buses. So in this one here, if you design a new bus. An old bus you don't design, it's already designed. So that is, when you read this, that is what it is. It is new buses. It's not old buses.
Mr. Rajda, you conveniently leave out the reference to operating and leasing of bus units.
Commissioner, I was referring to the emphasis was on the manufacture of new. So operating and leasing don't constitute manufacturing. But if you need me to deal with that, I mean, that I can deal with.
You see, so that evidence that the entire loan proceeds was to be utilized exclusively for the manufacture of new buses is incorrect. What we see in this clause is it also allows for the loan proceeds to be utilized towards the operation of these buses as well as the leasing of the bus units. You see that?
Commissioner, I see that and I accept that. It was not by intent, it was by oversight, but I can see in operating, but there, if I recall correctly, it's a minuscule amount compared to the capex because it referred to the people who operate the bus, who drive. I think there's probably 2 or 3 people in those buses, so it covers those costs. That's what I understand. In terms of the leasing of the buses, we're talking about you manufacture the bus and you lease it to somebody. But it does not, you have to have a bus to lease. You can't have something, you have to lease something. It's the manufacture and the leasing of buses.
Sorry, Mr. Raja, leasing could be also that you lease buses to do the job. It's not only that you lease out buses, but you lease in buses to fulfill the tasks that you have. So you don't necessarily, there's a way I would interpret leasing, is that it has, you can lease out a bus that you have manufactured or own, or you can lease a bus from a party that has manufactured buses available for the fit for purpose.
Commissioner, I never saw it that way, but I accept that it could be interpreted that way. But that's not the way I had interpreted it.
So now it's your evidence that it's the way you interpret it. So I must be less kind to you and say to you that there is no way that you could have interpreted by specifically excluding your attention to operating and the leasing of buses. It's in there. And in fact, the evidence before this commission was, and that's one of the aspects that has made this transaction look sinister, in accordance with your testimony together with your colleague, is that the loan proceeds were used for an ulterior purpose, not related to its exclusive purpose being the manufacture of new units. We now see that that evidence is misleading.
Commissioner, if I can respond to that. Throughout the entire interaction with MSD, the whole issue is about, have you used the money for new buses or old? That was what the emphasis was. We are unpacking things very technically, which I understand has to be done in terms of the agreement. But it was the PM portfolio management team's view was that the monies were used to settle, for example, the liability of SARS. That's what we are talking about. The money was not used for buses entirely. It was used to settle debts that were in arrear. That's my understanding of it. So, yeah, when we spoke about we said it was not that it was not applied for business purposes. That meant it had left the company. That we accepted, that it didn't leave, the company. But it was used for other business purposes. That was the main issue. And the issue was, we always understood this to be for new buses. I think that has come across many times. Right? And what we found is that, or the PMV team found, was that they could only verify one. That was what it was. It was not that to indicate that there was something sinister.
Let me
Sorry,
begin.
can I just ask a question there? Mr. Raja, if the funding was used for other purposes, settling of debt, out of the total loan, what proportion was used to settle debt? And was there any communication with the PIC that settling that debt would enable it to fully function and move forward or whatever? Was there any agreement in that regard to say this is how we want to apply it, notwithstanding the agreement to manufacture or lease or operate? What is the proportion, do you know?
Through you, Commissioner. Ms. Marcus, I don't know, but I'm glad you asked the question, because for us, that is all we are asking is, show us how the funds were used, right? Even if it was not used exclusively on the buses, then we can have a basis from which to move. You know, that's all we want. Even, I know it's in a legal process now, but ideally, if you look at the type, what the company does, the social good that it does, in an ideal situation, this company should continue in existence for the foreseeable future, and we should try and support it. But let's be open and see how we can find a solution, rather than being forced to the situation that we have now, where we are trying to exercise our rights in terms of the agreement.
Well, I'll begin by responding to what you've just said, by suggesting to you that we must first repair the damage that you've done to the reputation of this business through your evidence, sir, before we can even begin to think that there's a continued business in a year or two, or as you refer to it, as the foreseeable future. Mr. Rajda, here's the issue. At the tail end of your evidence, in response to the question that I posed to you, you made reference to there was nothing sinister. Now that's significant as a first step to repairing this damage to my client's reputation. You say there was nothing sinister. In other words, I read into that, nothing improper in the manner in which this facility was obtained and its subsequent use of the loan proceeds. In other words, let me make it simple. The directors or shareholders of this business didn't go and buy luxury vehicles, Ferraris and the like with the proceeds. Do you agree with me?
Through you, Commissioner, there was nothing untoward in the procuring of the loan. Let me start there. In terms of the use of the funds, albeit that it has been used for business purposes, I'm still of the view that the monies were not used entirely for its purposes.
Yes,
yeah, in terms of trying to explore how we could resolve the situation, during my testimony the last time, Ms. Marcus recommended that I approach the shareholders, firstly to make them understand, particularly those that are not operationally involved in the business. That was a request, so that they understand what is happening in the company. So I did that. I contacted one of the shareholders. I had a meeting with the shareholder. I made him aware of what has been happening, but it proceeded beyond that. It proceeded in a constructive way. How can we resolve the situation and come to an amicable solution? He undertook to talk to the other shareholders, because I requested, why don't we convene a meeting between all of the shareholders. Later he had called me and told me that the shareholders, and in particular Mr. Sean, I forget his surname, and Mr. Fernando, had refused to meet with me. So we couldn't progress further on it. Outside of this meeting room, before I could come in, I had a discussion with Mr. Fernando, and he tells me the complete opposite. So I don't know what to believe, but we are trying to find a solution to this, to the situation we have right now.
I assume, Mr. Aldrich, that at some stage you'll put it to the witness what the funds were applied to. Because he's making a statement that the funds weren't applied to the specific cause for it to be obtained.
We will get there in due course, Mr. Commissioner, with respect.
I hope the due course won't be too far away.
I'm going to do my level best, Mr. Commissioner. Mr. Rajdar.
Sorry, before you proceed, and I just want to take you to para 24 of Mr. Raj's original testimony. And because from the questioning and the discussions, I just want to be clear that I understand that it is not in dispute, or is it in dispute, that MST was in default in terms of its financial obligations or servicing of the loan at the time?
I can make that concession. That was indeed the case.
And everything else is, if you like, subordinate to that position, because that is the position of the PIC. We've got to ensure that the loans get serviced, or what happens to that. So to me, I just wanted to be clear that this is in fact not in dispute.
That
it is not in dispute that MST was in default of its financial obligations and servicing of the loan at the time Mr. Roger made the statement.
Might I confer with those who instruct me, Mr. Commissioner? Madam Commissioner, regrettably, I'm not in a position to make a submission in relation to that question posed, and I will need to take instructions directly from the client, who is in attendance today.
Can we try to do that while the cross-examination is going on, because it's quite material to the discussion as far as I would understand it?
I will ask. We will obtain the necessary instructions. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Might I then proceed? Mr. Rajdar, the application was submitted to the PIC in June of 2015. Do you agree?
I agree.
The proceeds of the facility were only paid out in July 2017, more than 2 years later. Do you agree?
I agree.
What was the reason for that significant delay?
Okay, there were several factors for the delay. The one is that you will note that we had made an approval initially on the 23rd of November 2015. The client, being MST, did not accept the conditions of our funding. So then there was quite a bit of silence around this for a while before there was an agreement in terms of considering an alternative structure. So we had represented the project to the committee with a different structure. So that would have been one of the reasons for the delay. Thereafter, I think it was a lot had to do with the legal process, the meeting of the fulfillment of the conditions precedent, and if I remember correctly, there was quite a bit of a dispute in terms of what the attorney or the conveyance's cost was for registering of SNBs. I think those were some of the main reasons for the protracted process of true disbursement.
And so you will concur with the statement that I put to you, that during that 2-year period, MST was trading. By virtue of its trading operations, it had expenditure. It was in fact manufacturing new buses, contrary to your version, but we'll get to that in a moment. And as a consequence of that significant delay, because you see the reason why the PIC was approached in 2015 was purely because MST was in need of the finance. Otherwise it wouldn't have approached you. It goes without saying. And during that 2-year period of its trading affairs, there were creditors. As you correctly point out, the South African Revenue Services, one, that had to be paid. And I can say to you, you're in fact correct. If you have regard to the application, you will note that that concession is made, that proceeds, the loan proceeds, some of it was utilized for payment of creditors. But that flows automatically from the trading affairs of MST. Any business has expenditure, has overheads, has creditors at the end of the day to pay. But that flowed from its trading activities, not anything unrelated to its trading activities. Do you agree with me?
Commissioner, I've indicated earlier that the funds were applied in the business. That's not in dispute. I'm not disputing that. All I'm saying, it was not in accordance with what we had agreed. You refer to the agreement. That's what the agreement says. That's what's clause 4.1. Clause 4.1 does not say in the settlement of debt. It doesn't state that. Now, you see, the important thing to note is that we are looking at expanding the business, creating more impact, not settling of SARS. That's an obligation that should have been done from ordinary course of business. You know, that's the way we see it. I mean, and that is what I am getting to. Let's just have open cards in terms of how the funding was used, and then let's see how we can come to an amicable solution.
Mr. Rajdar, your testimony that you could only find one new bus that had been manufactured, that evidence you gave this morning, are you saying, and are you absolutely certain about this, that from the time when the loan application was submitted in June of 2015, only one bus was manufactured? And I'm going to invite you, if that is, and you persist with that testimony, I want you to give us some corroborative evidence for that version of yours.
Through you, Commissioner, I think it was obvious I'm referring to buses from the proceeds of PIC funding, not buses whether the company had manufactured buses. That was what it is, and That's the information that is provided by our post-investment team, that they were only able to verify one bus that was a new bus using the proceeds from the PIC loan. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that MST did not manufacture any new bus. That's not what I am saying.
So you would concede that during that period, more buses may have been manufactured. You just simply don't have knowledge.
No, I did not say that nothing was. I think you are now taking me into something that I didn't say. I did not say that no buses were manufactured. I said that that the team was only able to verify one bus manufactured from the proceeds of the PIC funds. I can't put it more explicit than that.
How did you establish that, sir?
The post-investment team went out to go and verify these buses.
It was all hearsay, and I understand, Commissioner, that the rules of evidence are relaxed in terms of regulations, but the position is all you're telling us is you heard this. There's nothing before us that you can refer us to that in fact establishes that.
Through you, Commissioner, if I may explain how the PIC is structured. The PIC is structured where we have different divisions in place. So you have the investment team who would have considered the transaction. Then we have a post-investment team who go out and they monitor the transaction. We have to rely on what they come back to the PIC and report back to the committees. And that's I cannot personally go out and go and verify it myself and then come as a statement of fact and say that I've done that.
Sorry, can I just respond? I think it might just be helpful in evidence before this committee, and unfortunately Ms. Madzikanda is not here because she's part of the valuations department, but they specifically said that they went for an on-site visit. The client had indicated that 6 of the 7 buses would be delivered a week later. In November's site visit, there was only 1 bus, and the client said other buses were in Cape Town. In October, PMV asked for particulars of the buses to be registered under special notarial bond. The client sent details in October, however, later in March, different details were provided to the transaction team. So that's just a very brief summary. PMV made fresh attempts to verify the buses at a site visit in Cape Town. Only 1 bus could be verified based on VIN numbers provided. So it's not hearsay, it was evidence before this commission by Ms. Madzikanda.
Insofar as this witness is concerned, you are talking in respect of a report that you got from people like Ms. Madzikanda.
Indeed, Mr. Commissioner. Whilst I'm not sure that that report was made by Ms. Madzikanda, I accept that there is evidence of that in these proceedings. What I put to the witness was that that person remained unnamed. It was a committee that simply conveyed this information. He has nothing in his possession to show us that factually that was correct. That was all that I was putting to the witness.
Mr. Commissioner, it's not my witness, but I think part of my function in this commission is to see that everybody is treated fairly, and my learned friend has treated the witness very fairly up till now, except for this particular aspect that Ms. Marcus also mentioned. There was documentary evidence placed before the Commission under oath that MST supplied information to the PIC of registration numbers of buses. And from that information, it was established that only 1 was a new bus. That was the information under oath. And that was also information that was at the disposal of this witness.
Yes, I remember that very well. That was the position. But I think what you are saying, Mr. Aldrich, is that this witness has no personal or factual knowledge of that position. He is speaking in respect of reports that were made to the PIC.
Indeed, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, through you, Ms. Marcus, I have an instruction in relation to the question posed concerning the default status, and I'm instructed to place the following on record, that as at 6 July 2018, when the very first payment was due, there was an inability on the part of MST to make that very first payment. In consequence of which, the PIC restructured the loan, and certainly at present, MST is not in default of its obligations concerning the restructured facility.
I accept that. That's not the to me the question is in 18th of March, because the question to this witness is was his testimony accurate? And therefore at that point in time, in 18th of March, his statement was MST is in default in terms of its financial obligations or servicing the loan. My understanding from what you're saying is that is correct, but subsequently the matter has been addressed through both the restructuring that you're saying and that the loan is being serviced.
Mr. Commissioner, the loan was restructured on the 11th of February of this year.
That's 2019.
Indeed.
Okay.
If that provides clarity. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Through you, Commissioner, I'm not aware of that, but I will check. I will check at the office.
Insofar as the loan proceeds is concerned, I want to have regard to MST 7, which is the statement. Mr. Commissioner, it's to be found at page 119, a reference to paragraphs 18 to 20. And to speed matters up, Mr. Rajka, I refer you to paragraph 18 under the heading Involvement of Royeth Rajdar in MST deal. You say, with regards to this particular transaction, I had no direct involvement in the transaction other than ascertaining that the nature of the transaction did indeed fit the PIC mandate. You see that. It goes further at paragraph 20. From this point onwards, the investment team run with the project, and at each point in the investment process where submissions needed to be made to the relevant PIC committees, I would review the document compiled by the investment and sign for these submissions. Is that statement correct, sir? And I want you to carefully consider what you said there.
It is correct.
It is correct. You also testified in these proceedings, in the transcript, at page 10, lines against lines 9 to 17. You say there, and I'm not going to read it because we're pressed for time, but you say that concerning your involvement, you say you had no direct involvement in the transaction, other than to establish that the nature of the transaction did indeed fit the PIC mandate. You see that?
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
Sir, did you not have interactions with the directors or certain of the directors of MST?
Through you, Commissioner, if I may explain. When I had discussions with the investigating team of the Commission, I was requested to provide a statement on MST, but to specifically exclude the Pretty Law matter.
To exclude what?
To specifically exclude the dealing with the Pretty Law matter and the 5 million rand. So you'd see that the statement does not include any of that. Now, most of my interactions with MST, and in particular Mr. Fernando, and via email to Mr. Watkins related to that, because I needed to produce information, one, to supply to the Butlander inquiry, two, in terms of providing information to the Directors Affairs Committee of the PIC when the investigation was being done. So that, but in terms of the loan, up until the approval of the loan, the first time we approved the loan, I had no discussions with the officials of MST.
You've now for the second time referred to pretty low. My understanding of what you're saying is that that is how it so happened that you were required to give evidence in these proceedings. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. My interactions were mainly on the pretty low matter, save for the first time I had met Mr. Fernando was with regards to looking at an alternative structure of the loan. But most of my interactions related to collation of information in relation to the pretty low matter.
Mr. Rajda, it's important that we make the applicant's position clear to you in relation to the topic of pretty low. It is not a theme of my cross-examination, but I can safely put it to you that what was concluded in the Butlander report following its investigation was that there was nothing untoward or no evidence of anything improper insofar as the conduct of pretty low related to the affairs of MST. You're aware of that?
I'm aware.
Thank you. Let's return to your earlier evidence, and that's to be found in the transcript at page 8, line 25 to page 9, line 2. You say the following. So when the investment team informed MST of the conditions of approval by PMC, MST was not willing to offer equity to PIC unless it was offered based on a company value of 103 million rand. That was your evidence, which means that you certainly at that point in time had knowledge of the affairs of MST, correct?
Sorry, are you referring to the transcript or to his statement? Because that's paragraph 13 of the statement. I think it's one and the same.
It's one and the same,
Yeah.
Mr. Commissioner, but I'm referring to the transcript at page 8, lines 24. Yes, but it is one and the same, with respect. The question was, at that point in time, you very well knew about MST and its business. In other words, what it was doing, what its worth was at the time, and so forth. Do you agree?
Yes, I would. As I mentioned in my statement, I would review documents or submissions from time to time that the investment team prepares.
You knew it so intricately that you refused the valuation in the amount of 103 million rand.
Yes, and I think that can be proved today. The company is technically bankrupt.
Then, with reference to you, we'll find it on page 43 of the transcript, against lines 8 and 9. This is the evidence of your colleague, Ms. Madzikanda. With reference to you now, sir, she says, but because they would want to see key decision makers, and he alluded that he had spoken to them. That's a reference to your interaction with MST and its representatives, not so?
Hey, can you repeat that? I'm not following as I can't find the page.
Page 43, against lines 8 and 9.
Sorry, who is the reference to he in there?
To you. So Ms. Madzikanda testified Because they would want to see key decision makers, and he alluded that he had spoken to them. Was that not a reference to you?
If I can recall correctly, the time that I had spoken to Mr. Fernando was when the post-investment team had gone out to verify these buses or get information for the special notarial bond, and they were not succeeding. They had come to me and asked if I can please call him, and I did call him, and he basically told us that our post-investment team didn't know what they were doing. Those buses are there. That was my interaction.
Yeah, but the point, sir, that I'm trying to establish through your testimony is that you involved yourself in this process. There was nothing that restricted you from doing what was necessary to establish anything that you may have been concerned about as it related to the affairs of MST. You agree with me?
Commissioner, I think I need to explain my role in the PIC so that it becomes apparent that I do not get involved intricately in the transaction. That is why we have an investment team. And if you go to my statement under paragraph 4, it will give you that investment team from 4B to 4E. Those are the people I rely upon to do this. Now, the fact that I have to review documentation before they go to committee, I have to speak with them from time to time. But I don't get involved directly in the transaction. You won't see me going on with the due diligence team. I have not been to MST. I don't know where the officers are. So that's what I'm trying to indicate. You take a 2-year period up to disbursement. I can tell you my interactions with MST. So I think it's being exaggerated what direct involvement, no direct involvement is. I think you are stretching it a bit too far.
Now tell me the part that you were referred to at page 43. That last sentence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, from line 7. But because they would want to see key decision makers, and he alluded that he had spoken to them. Do you remember that? Ms. Matsikanda testified to that effect, that at some stage you said you had spoken to the key decision makers, I suppose, of MST.
Commissioner, I'm not sure the context in which it is. I'm just thinking that the one time that they had escalated something to me had to deal with the special notarial bond and the verification of those buses. But that's the only thing that I know of.
If you go to the page before, page 42, from the 5th line, at that meeting I was instructed by, I suppose it's Mr. Raja, not to discuss. It seems to me that it is in that context, in that meeting, that this came out.
Commissioner, that particular reference to not discussing, that related to a report that was, I think, if I remember correctly, at 30th of June, results as at 30th of June, that was presented, I think, if I remember correctly, on the 3rd of October of that year. And I told the team not to present that report because I had discussions with Mr. Fernando, and he was insistent on certain things that he is saying is factually incorrect. So I didn't want that to be presented to the committee if we couldn't establish that. There was a bit of debate around it. And hence, that was the context in which that paragraph relates.
I think that was the question, whether at that stage you did have contact with key decision makers of MST. And by the way, is Mr. Fernando present? I see you look that way every time. All right, yes, thank you.
Yes, but what I'm saying, Chair, is that is where the matters are escalated, but those are very few and far between, and Mr. Fernando can even tell you that the amount of, that I would say that 80% of my interactions with Mr. Fernando related to the pretty low matter.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. If I may proceed. Thank you, sir. Mr. Rajda, evidence of yours is not correct. Let me take you to MST 26, page 624 of the applicant's bundle, Mr. Commissioner. And I put all of this to you so as to demonstrate that that version of yours, which you had no direct involvement, is very far from the truth, sir. Let's look at an email that was sent to you by Gareth Watkins, a financial manager, in fact the second applicant in these proceedings, on 23 March 2016. Is that your email address? It says roy.rajdhar@pic.gov.za.
That is my email address.
And did you, to the best of your recollection, did you receive this email?
Well, if it came there, I would have received it.
Good. It says the subject matter of this email is the MST facility. Let me read it to you. It might jog your memory. It says, "Good morning, Roy. I understand you've been very busy and unable to meet to discuss the dynamics around the MST financing deal, to iron out the deal. At the moment, we're under a lot of pressure to deliver on the Gauteng Economic Development Contract 5 vehicles, as well as the NHBRC contract 2 vehicles, which amounts to 7 vehicles which are in varied stages of development and has required substantial amounts of capital and is putting the business under substantial strain." Do you see that?
I see that.
Now, your records, and it's probably unfair of me to ask you whether your records show a response to this email.
And that I can confirm.
It may be necessary that I, with respect, ask that we return on a future date. And if that request meets with your approval, Mr. Commissioner, I'd want to have Mr. Rajda consult his records to establish what his response was to this email. But what this demonstrates, Mr. Rajda, is there was direct communication with you insofar as the application for this facility was concerned. You cannot dispute that, can you?
Through you, Commissioner, I want to explain when I say direct involvement. It's a pity that, the investment process which I presented to this commission in January this year, it's long. The process of concluding a transaction is quite exhaustive. It's long, it's lengthy. I'm looking at it in relation to that. So, for example, if I say the first approval that we went for, that we had the approval, I never engage the client. I don't go on due diligence. I do not do the term sheet. I don't write up the appraisal report. I don't interact much with the client. It's not only on this transaction, Commissioner. And that's what I'm trying to say. You can't pick isolatedly emails, right? Isolatedly emails and conclude that I've got direct involvement. My interaction, for example, with Mr. Fernando up to the final approval, he will tell you was 15 minutes. You can't have in a period of 1 year tell me 15 minutes of a conversation is direct involvement. I think it must be placed in context. That's what I'm saying here. That a direct involvement in the transaction, meaning being involved in the due diligence. I don't get involved in the due diligence, and I've testified on that on other transactions at this commission. That is what I'm getting at. If you want to define direct involvement as now and then you get an email, then yes, I was directly involved. So if that is what you want, I was directly involved.
Yes, thank you for that concession. Did you sign off on the funding approval for this transaction, Mr. Rajda?
Through you, Commissioner, I sign off on all documentation except for the legal agreement. So if you had an engagement letter, you had a term sheet, you had an approval of an investment, it would be signed by me.
And you would only have signed if you had acquired sufficient knowledge enabling you to do so, not so?
Yes, I would review, and I would, to a large extent, place reliance on my team.
Switch on your mic, please.
I apologize, Mr. Commissioner. Annexure MST 15 at page 360. This is an email sent by Sapati Moichela from the PIC, dated 28 June 2016, to the then Chief Executive Officer of MST, Fernando Acafrau, and certain other persons were included in this email communication. The subject matter is MST funding approval letter. Have you had sight prior to today of this letter, Mr. Rajda?
Yes.
You have had sight of it?
Yes.
You will note, it reads as follows. Dear Mr. Acafrau, we are pleased to inform you that the PIC has approved a funding of 21 million rand towards MST's expansionary plans. Do you see that?
I don't see the words expansionary plans if I'm looking at page 361.
360?
Oh, yes, I see that.
Expansionary plans. My emphasis on those words, expansionary plans. Not, and as we now know from a reading of clause 4.1 of the agreement, the manufacture of new buses. Expansionary plans. What were they? Do you know?
Commissioner, expansionary plans mean the expansion of the business. That is what it would mean.
Yes. And would you like to interpret that for us in the context of MST's business?
It was a procurement of new buses.
Where do you see that, sir?
That is if, unfortunately, we don't have our appraisal documents and scoping documents here, but that is what it will show.
Exactly my point. It doesn't say that. But we can go further.
No, sorry, Commissioner, I'm saying you wouldn't know that because you won't be in possession of those appraisal documents.
But you, sir, surely you prepared for your testimony in these proceedings. It seems that you're wholly unprepared with reference to a number of responses that you've given.
Through you, Commissioner, I'm talking about the appraisal report and scoping report. I'm saying it's not part of this this spec, so you wouldn't be able to see what we meant by expansionary plans. But I think clearly the legal agreements have been done, and it reflects that. It's clause 4.1.
And Mr. Rajda, you were in continuous communication with, in particular, the CEO, Mr. Acafrau, both telephonically and by way of WhatsApp communications. Do you recall that?
During which period?
During the period prior to and after the loan facility.
Your question has not been...
I apologize. During the period prior to and after the loan facility was approved. And I'm going to provide you with evidence of that. Do you wish to dispute that, sir?
Commissioner, to the best of my knowledge, prior to the approval, which was on the 23rd of November, I had not been in 23rd of November 2015. As far to the best of my recollection, I was not in contact with Mr. Fernando.
But your version is that subsequent to that you may have.
Yes, and as I mentioned, 80% of my interactions with Mr. Fernando related to matters revolving around the pretty low matter, and Mr. Fernando is here and he can even confirm that.
Let's have regard to what you say, for instance, in a WhatsApp communication. It's annexure MST 39. Mr. Commissioner, page 706 of the applicant's bundle. I read it to you. 20 November 2017, 21 hours 17 minutes and 5 seconds. You have this reference. Roy, PIC executive. Hi Fernando, hope you are doing well. We have a client who does leasing So if you have, say, a government department wanting a bus, it could be funded by our client and department pays a lease charge. MST sells bus to our client. Is that something which would work for you? Unquote. Now, I'll tell you what I make of this. This is you actually wanting to partner a client of yours up with MST. Would you agree with me that my assessment is accurate?
That is accurate.
And now you're having this interaction which is wholly unrelated to the loan proceeds and the facility, and you're trying to partner up somebody else. This business must have made a very good impression on you for you to do that, not so?
Commissioner, if I can explain the context here. So what PIC does from time to time is provide wholesale facilities to certain intermediaries. So if we're talking, let's say, for example, SME, business partners, and so forth. So what would happen is that when we get transactions that fit within there, instead of us doing them, and this transaction, the MST transaction, is a small transaction in relation to PIC's business. We'll refer them through that intermediary. That is what was being discussed there. And I think in previous testimonies, and that if you look at our investment process, you also want to enhance value of your investees. So if you can create business between investees, we do that. And that is what the SMS relates to.
In fact, what I'm putting to you is simply this, that at that point in time, in 2017, you had acquired intimate knowledge of the business affairs of MST, so much so that you had sufficient comfort pairing MST up with another client of yours. That's what I'm putting to you, and you'll concede that.
Yes, I'll concede that.
Thank you. All right. The next theme of my cross-examination is the timeline. In other words, what transpires, significant events from the time that this loan application is submitted in June of 2015 up until the proceeds of the facility are paid out in July of 2017. In your evidence before the Commission, you testified, and we'll find that on the page 8, Mr. Commissioner. You, against lines 14 on page 8, you testified in June 15, MST had applied for a loan of 45 million rand. To save time, I'm not going to read the remainder of your testimony into the record, save and except for a reference to the final line on page 8, line 25, you say, when the investment team informed MST of the conditions of approval by PMC, MST was not willing to offer equity to PIC unless it was offered based on a company value of 103 million rand. Now, if one summarizes all of that evidence of yours, and it runs right through to page 10 against lines 18, all I wish to put to you, Mr. Rajda, is that considering this application, the amounts in respect of which a facility could have been provided ranged in the beginning from 45 million rand, which was reduced to 30 million rand for reasons associated with MST's refusal to provide equity to PIC. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then there is a reduction from 30 million rand to 20 million rand. And there were two reasons advanced for that reduction. But basically, and this is what is important about what I'm putting to you, it was at the instance of MST that there was this reduction for two reasons. One, it did not want to provide the PIC with equity, and secondly, there was a finance facility in place from Daimler Chrysler in the amount of 9 million rand, which explains the reduction from 30 million rand to the ultimate value of the facility being 21 million rand, which was paid out. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
So what we can glean from that is it's not some reckless lender approaching the PIC with total disregard of its inability potentially to repay this loan. It in fact requests a reduced facility as a prudent lender would do in the circumstances. Do you agree?
I agree.
Thank you. Now, chronologically, what then transpires is that there is a fulfillment of all the suspensive conditions, and my emphasis is that what was required to have been done in relation to the further security, and I'll use an example. The general notarial bond registered over MST's movable property, in fact, was registered in an amount in excess of 38 million rand. You agree?
Agree.
And that tells us only one thing. The PIC has security. It's not just over MST's immovables. It has significant security as it relates to the loan. The loan being 21 million and there's security already in the amount of 38 million. But what we already know from the agreement and what is included in the requirement of the suspensive conditions having to be fulfilled is the guarantees to be provided and so forth. We have all of that in place. So there's never been a risk for the PIC that it would not recoup the value associated with the proceeds of this loan facility. Do you agree with me?
No, I don't agree.
Why don't? Tell us why you don't agree.
Because when you have, firstly, if you have a general notarial bond, that is available to all creditors of the company who have that, who also have a general, have that as a security. Number two, if you can have 38 million rand in movables, well, obviously some of that is already subject to some liability, but 38 million rand in a forced sale, you don't realize 38 million. In my estimation, you'll get less than 10. Right? So therefore, guarantees, yes, it's there, but sometimes you would get guarantees from a company that is just a pure shell. You can't place much reliance on it. However, having a special notarial bond, in addition to that, would improve the security significantly when combined with the other forms of security.
Mr. Rajda, the line of my cross-examination arrives at this. This is what your colleague Majikanda testified. It's in the transcript at page 33 against lines 17 or 16 to 18, and I'm going to invite your comment to this. This is with reference to the security. She says, so even the final list which we have today is different from the first two, and this is what we are establishing, is that there is actually no specific PIC security. And what we've been given is what they have in stock from what they've procured a very long time ago. That's not true. There is security, and we've already established that. Do you agree?
Commissioner, if I may, I don't know the proceedings in cross-examination, but I don't know to what extent I must be cross-examined on someone else's statement.
I'll assist you if I may, Mr. Commissioner. It's proper and appropriate for a cross-examiner to test the truthfulness of your version and the truthfulness of another version, of a version of another witness who's testified in these proceedings, to put that witness's version to you and ask for your comment.
I accept that. I'm just seeking clarity, Commissioner. But
thank you. Will you now respond to the question, sir?
So there would have been security in terms of there being a general notarial bond, it might have been with the reference to the word specific is referring to the specific asset. Now, specific asset, if you register security over a specific asset, that is what we call a special notarial bond.
And if I was to put it to you that as we speak, there are at least 6 mobile bus units unencumbered available for that purpose, you cannot dispute that, can you?
I may not be able to dispute it, but I might say, are those new buses?
So I think we've already dealt with the agreement. Why is there now a distinction between new buses and what I offered to you as unencumbered buses?
Through you, Commissioner, unencumbered buses refer to a form of security. Right? You can have unencumbered assets, whether they're new or they're old, but the buses, there's a distinction between old and new. You can have special notarial bond over both, but as I indicated earlier, that the purpose of the funds was for new buses, and the security related to the buses that were funded. That's why the special notarial bond and on new buses, not existing assets. Existing assets would be covered under a general notarial bond.
That's simply not correct. Let me demonstrate why I say that to you. If you go to page 386 of the applicant's bundle, Mr. Commissioner, it's in fact MST 16. Here we have, in the definitions clause, a clear understanding of what special notarial bond is. And I read it for your benefit, Mr. Rajda. It means the special notarial bonds executed or to be executed by the borrower in favor of the lender in respect of the bus units owned by the borrower in an amount of 21 million rand in form and substance satisfactory to the lender. Do you see that? Where do you see a reference to new buses in that definition? Please tell us.
Commissioner, if I look at that, there's in the second line, there's a reference to bus units, and I'll go to the definition of bus units, and 1.1.22 on page 369. It means mobile facilities manufactured in the form of buses, and that's where I conclude that it's still referring to new buses, and it's also, we all know that when you fund buses, including banks under credit agreements, they take security over the bus or the asset they have funded.
Mr. Rajka, I don't wish to be unkind to you. You're really clutching at straws, sir. I've invited you to tell us where you see a reference to new buses.
There is no reference to new buses in the sense of the word new. There are new buses. But I think it's clear from clause 4.1 that we are referring to new buses. I think it's clear that when you do asset financing, vehicle financing, you take security on the asset you fund. You don't go and take security on another asset. You buy a car, Mercedes, and you go and take a security on another car. I think that's how it is done. And that is what the intention in these agreements are.
It's not your purpose to testify. You're not a signatory to this agreement, as you've already testified, and you certainly did not create this document. But before we go any further, sir, my emphasis was on unencumbered mobile bus units. And I find support for that reference to what is contained in the definition of special notarial bond in the second line, a reference to bus units owned. My emphasis being on owned. There it is. And that lends support for what I've put to you, sir. There is no reference to new buses. And let me take it one step further. Can you give us any indication of where any document refers to buses manufactured during a specific time period? Are you able to do so as you sit there?
No, I'm not able to do so. But
Thank you.
What I can say is that where we're saying, let's say in clause 4.1, the funds will be used for construction of new buses, it means that it is after. But there's no specific date that I can say.
So there's no substance to this version of yours. We've now demonstrated that. And we've offered you that security. It's there. We can go further, Mr. Rajar. If we go to Mr. Commissioner, Annexure MST 26, if you would. Ms. Marcus at page 624 of the applicant's bundle. This email, which we've dealt with, also demonstrates that you knew as the PIC that the buses were already being manufactured. And here's the significance of what I'm putting to you, sir. This is in March of 2016. The application is submitted in June of 2015. You know that buses are already being manufactured. There you see it, the reference to the 7 buses. Now, that being the case, tell us whether your evidence that there was only 1 bus that was manufactured relates to a period sometime after this email was sent to you, or if not, when does it relate to that? You being in a position to establish only 1 bus having been manufactured. Because you see, this email tells you, we as the MST are in the process of manufacturing units. You see that?
Through you, Commissioner, at this point in time, MST has rejected our proposal for funding. So there's no funding, there's no PIC funding. At this point, you will see in Mr. Watkins' statement there, what he is trying to do is say, let's go back to the original approval, reinstate it, but implement the transaction in 2. We'll do equity later, we can talk about it later. So there is no PIC approval at this point in time. Now I'm going to come back to this issue of 1 bus. This is after the transaction has been implemented and the team has been trying to establish the buses for special notarial bond. That is what the 1 bus relates to. So I don't know what the intention, what we're trying to establish with this email, because there is no funding approved at this point in time for these buses.
I challenge you on that version. Is it not correct that the first approval for this facility was made known already in November of 2015, Mr. Rajar?
It was made known and it was not accepted by MST.
Yes. The terms of it were not accepted. It's not as though this application was withdrawn and no further work was done. You see, earlier I asked you, and you conceded that the application was submitted in June of 15, the proceeds eventually paid out in 17. It was a continuous process of negotiations between the respective contracting parties. Are you now saying something different?
No, I'm not saying something different. All I am saying is that up to this point of this email, there's offer and there's acceptance. For there to be a contract, from what I understand, there must be offer and acceptance. There's an offer, there's no acceptance. So you continue, and that's why after that we came to a new facility.
Yes.
Where it was accepted, and then we proceeded to the legal agreement.
And throughout there was this discussion and negotiation process, ongoing throughout that period.
We don't
during
dispute
which,
that.
if you'll allow me to finish, sir, during which time you acquired knowledge of the fact that buses were in fact being manufactured. That's the reason why I put this mail to you. Not so.
You have raised this before, and I have said I don't dispute that the company was manufacturing buses.
Good.
Right? I said that I don't dispute. We are talking about the manufacture of buses from the proceeds of PIC money. I don't know why this point is not coming across.
That's come through very clearly. It's that you seem to contradict your version, sir. If we can then turn to page 360. Again, June in 2016, there's this reference to expansionary plans. That includes, and you cannot dispute that, the ongoing business of MST, not only in relation to the manufacture of new buses. Do you want to reconsider your position?
No, I don't want to reconsider.
Thank you. Then, sir, we go to page 361, the very next page, the second unnumbered paragraph. The funding is advanced to MST for the purpose of manufacturing and delivering on the firm operational bus orders received from numerous clients. Nowhere do we see a reference to new buses as it relates to the timeline that I've provided you with. Do you agree with me?
Commissioner, I'm going to stick to clause 4.1 of the loan agreement. To me, clause 4.3.1 is indicating new buses, and that's the point I'm going to stick at, is the legal agreements. That's my interpretation.
But you've already conceded that interpretation may be wrong, sir.
I'm saying that is my interpretation. And I'm saying that having reviewed documentation from the investment team, we've always understood it to be new buses. Now, if I may refer to the same email that you referred to, that's from Mr. Watkins, 7 million, 7 buses times 3 million. We know that a new bus is 3 million. That is why it's a new bus. A new bus is 3 million. 7 times 3 is 21.
And to demonstrate further this ongoing communication throughout that period, on the 1st of March 17, Xolani Matthews sends an email to Gareth Watkins, and he says, amongst other things, we confirm that we'll be visiting your premises to inspect buses and the like. You agree with me? This was all correspondence that flowed throughout this period.
Yes, but it was not between him and Mr. Watkins. That document that you're reading from is certainly not between him and Mr. Watkins, but between Xolani, whatever the name
Xolani
is.
Matthews. Indeed.
And Mr. Watkins.
It's just to demonstrate, Mr. Commissioner, that there was this ongoing communication with reference to what was happening within the affairs of MST during that period.
Yes, ongoing communication between the PIC, not necessarily the witness, and MST.
No, I agree. The reason why I'm advancing this is just to show that there was this ongoing between the PIC. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. So ultimately what we then see, sir, is there's ongoing communications. You're aware of the fact that manufacturing is taking place, and ultimately you're hardly in a position to say that when the proceeds are paid out, they ought not to be utilized towards expenses incurred in the production of buses already in 2015. Do you agree with me?
Can you repeat that for me, please?
This is critical. So when the loan proceeds are paid out in July of 2017, the PIC knows, and that's why I've referred you to all these communications, the PIC knows that at that time, ever since the application was submitted in 2015, buses were being manufactured. You accept that?
Buses could be manufactured. That could be from Mercedes-Benz, for that matter, finance.
It matters not, sir. Buses were being manufactured. Here's the issue. We already know that the proceeds may be utilized for purposes of the manufacture of buses and extraneous purposes. We've seen that in clause 4.1. Here's the issue. Show me any document that says when the loan proceeds are paid out, it may not be utilized for debts that had incurred in relation to the manufacture of buses during the period 2015 up until March 2017. Can you show me such a document?
The agreement states on 4.1, the borrower shall apply all amounts borrowed by it under the facility for the purposes of designing, constructing, assembling, operating, and leasing of buses.
Yes.
Right? So that it does not say that you can use the money to refinance buses built under someone else's facility. That's not what it says.
Where do you get this version that there was a refinancing operation in place?
Because you are saying that the buses had already been manufactured and therefore you could apply the, that's what I'm understanding, you could apply the proceeds of the 21 million to some other purpose.
Mr. Rajda, let me explain to you, because you don't seem to understand the nature of MSD's business. You see, certain buses, in fact, all the buses are built on truck chassis. Certain of the truck chassis are financed through Daimler Chrysler, not all. And in relation to that which is not financed through Daimler Chrysler, are you saying that the loan proceeds may not have been utilized for expenditure incurred in the production of those buses? That's the question.
Okay, if I can get clarity. Obviously, if you are building these buses, it's being funded from somewhere, right? Let's say it's another lender who's funding it. So the buses get built. Then when the proceeds of the PIC funding comes, and it's not used for buses, you must bear with me, I'm trying to understand this. That would constitute refinancing.
No, the way I understand it, Mr. Raja, the MSD says to you, we are busy manufacturing buses, we need financing, we need a loan to finance these buses. What is wrong, even if you approve the loan 2 years later, in paying for those buses that have already been manufactured? Are you suggesting that they couldn't use that money that PIC made available to pay for those buses that had already or were in the process of being manufactured when they approached the PIC?
Commissioner, if that was our understanding, we would have registered the special notarial bond on those buses. We wouldn't be chasing MST to find the buses that have been manufactured from PIC money. We wouldn't be doing that. We won't be sitting with the problem today. Had that been the case, we would have registered the special notarial bond on those buses.
Was your understanding that once the application is approved for funding, then they could give instructions for buses to be manufactured?
That is the case. When PIC approves funding, well, if it is to be used for some other purpose, let's say repaying somebody or refinancing somebody, then we'll specifically state that. That's what we would do in the agreement. So that was not the, let me put it to you this way, Commissioner, that was never the intention. It was, we'll provide you with funding, build these buses from the proceeds of that, and let us have our special notarial bond on those assets.
I think I do understand your thinking at the time. I'm not saying it was right or wrong.
I'd like to take it a step further and say that your reasoning is not supported by the agreement, sir. You are not able to refer me to any caption in this or clause in this agreement that supports your interpretation. In fact, I take it one step further. If that is what was envisaged by the PIC, you were the drafter of this document. You would have made it very clear, and you didn't.
Commissioner, I just want to stand by my version of it, that the intention was always, and I'm not going to change my position on this matter. I'm not going to change.
I note that it is 4 minutes before 12. I know that I was afforded grace until 12 o'clock. I wish to move on to a new theme, and I think it would probably be best to establish whether we are going to adjourn at 12 o'clock before I do so. So as just not to disrupt the witness's line of thinking when I raise the next theme with him.
How long will you be? Will you do it in 4 minutes?
Certainly not. And I apologize for that, but
well, Ms. Marcus and I need to travel somewhere and we need to rush to get to the airport. If you go to your next line of cross-examination, will you finish by 12:30?
No, Mr. Commissioner. I don't want to. There is a bit still that remains to be dealt with. In fairness to the Commission's work, I'd like to place all of these facts as I've been instructed before you for your ultimate consideration. And I don't think it would be fair to try and rush this through the witness. So I would seek an indulgence to accommodate Mr. Commissioner and your assistance, and perhaps it's then prudent that we arrange a further date if that meets with your approval.
Certainly, I think we can't continue today. What I could say is, can you arrange with Advocate Libber for a date?
Are we required to do so now, Mr. Commissioner?
Not necessarily. We will adjourn and then you can meet.
Thank you.
Libber will then communicate that to us when we come back on Monday.
We will certainly do so. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, before we adjourn, can I, through the Commission, ask also to assist this Commission with the following? We are still not in possession of the audited and signed financial statements of MST at the time when they applied for funding. We need that. We need detailed proof of the utilization of the funds. And thirdly, proof of all buses acquired, whether new or old. If we can have that information through the Commission, Mr. Commissioner, and I will then arrange a proper date or a suitable date with my learned friend, because I suppose it will also be necessary to cross-examine Ms. Madzikanda.
Will you be in a position to get information from your clients with regard to those aspects?
Mr. Commissioner, I've noted the request. I can tell you that some of this information requested is already contained in the application. That which is not, we will certainly attend to provide in the event that it is available. I will make my best efforts to ensure that that happens. My clients, by the way, are in attendance and they've noted the request. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Can we also ask that in relation to the buses, exact date of production and usage and so on, so that we have a timeline as to when production took place, when manufacture took place, which buses are leased or not leased, what the costs were, so that the overall period from 2015 approval to current is exactly on the table and we know what we're talking about properly.
As you please, Commissioner, we will attend to that. Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, for what it's worth, and I'm just a creature of instruction, I'm instructed to convey to the Commission that MST has gone to the trouble of securing the presence of buses for what it's worth. They are actually in attendance.
Sorry, gone to
The buses are actually in attendance today at the proceedings. They parked outside, Mr. Commissioner.
4 of them.
How many? 6 and 1 on radio and Cape Town. There are 6 buses available today in attendance, and there's a video conference link up that will depict the other one in Cape Town at the premises of MST, Mr. Commissioner. I guess this is done purely to demonstrate that they're not phantom, they actually exist.
Well, could arrangements be made between the 2 legal teams to have a look and if necessary, agree on a minute?
We will do so, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Then we will then ask you to adjourn till 10 on Monday. That is the 8th of July.
We shall then adjourn at this stage until Monday the 10th. 8th of July at 10.